Okay. Well, welcome back for part two. I want to commend everybody for sending me questions, getting your homework in. I have to confess that in the last 2 weeks, I've been doing budget myself. I had a board meeting. I've got state library board stuff. So you get my attention for the rest of this week. So I'll be getting back in touch with you and offering suggestions, asking questions if I have any on what you sent. So it's really great to see all the homework. Now I just have to work the homework. Okay, so this is part two. We focused in the first one with your entire budget, the whole enchilada. And so what we're going to do this time is we're going to tie into how that fits inside your municipality's budget, whether that is a township or a city. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce the term mill. I think we briefly talked about this last time, but a mill is 1/1000th of the property's appraised value. So we're going to look at some things, and I'm going to point out the appraised value. I'm going to ask you to chat or back what you think the value of a mill is. Property tax is also known as ad valorem tax. They're synonymous, mean the same thing. That's that property tax bill that you pay every May and December, or if you're really good, you pay it all in December, however that works for you. There are two things to know for cities and townships. You have both an estimated and a final valuation. So you're doing this budget work now on an estimate, and you're determining the dollars you need, and it comes up to a certain mill levy based on that valuation, estimated valuation. In November, when the final valuation is out November 1st, you're going to have the same dollars, but a different valuation number. So the mill levy will change slightly depending on what that valuation does. If the valuation went up, the mill will go down. Your budget dollars in the center. If your valuation went down, your mill levy will go up slightly. It's an inverse relationship. So keeping that in mind, I've put this back in here so you can kind of look through this again and get the idea of timing. You're right now in that part where I'm sure your municipality has been in touch with you and said, hey, we need to know your numbers. How many of you have already had to give your numbers? Could you type in chat?
Or raise your hands.
Or yeah, if you know how to raise hands, you want to talk to them about that?
Yeah, the raising the hand.
I see it. I see you there.
Okay, you can raise your hands on video, but you can also raise your hand if you look at the bottom of the participants window. There's a raise hand button. If you click that, Jackie is and Tracy now has raised her hand, and Nicole. So yeah, there's your hand.
I think everybody has actually been forced to do what I'm giving you for homework already, but this will help you think through the process and what you want to do for next year, depending on how it went this year. This is the first year of a big change, so I'm sure they're jumping the gun early because they don't know what they're doing yet, the city or township. Townships actually should know more than cities because townships have not got anything different in their budget from last year. So I'm telling you to start with the November, when I said to you last time, when you look at this to know what a mill might be worth, look at the previous November certified valuation. So I'm going to tell you that here is the state form that the city or township fills out. And the green box here with the blue around it, that's something the county clerk goes in and writes in November, the final assessed total valuation. If that, when you go out on the website that I showed you in the previous slide, if you go out on that website and there's no writing in this column here, call the county clerk. You can start with the city clerk, but if they're harassed or busy or whatever, call the county clerk, because they will give you that number without a problem for your city or township. Districts, starting with that same certified valuation, you are, as a district, are only taxed based on the estimate. Why? That was changed a number of years ago. There was some legislator's wife that was a county clerk that just really didn't like having to deal with changing districts for some reason. And so your mill levy and everything is based on the estimate. So what you put out when you publish is what you're going to get at the mill rate you're going to get. They don't change you. If you're that district library out there and you have more questions, call me and I'll walk you through this. I have some things for you as well later on. The budget, this is stuff that all the libraries will have to know it was done. The city or township will publish in the paper, and that's going to be probably at the end of June, maybe early July. If they decide they have to go to election, they're going to try to get it out soon enough that they can maybe hit the primary date in August for their election. I'm guessing almost all of them are going to try desperately not to have to go to election if they're a city or a county. Remember, townships and district libraries, your law has not changed. So what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the paper by August 5th. The township will. Districts have to do this directly. Then you can't have the hearing any sooner than 10 days after it came out for publication. Or if you count publication as day 1, it's the 11th day. Then the statute says that it should be turned into the county clerk by August 25th if you're that district library, or your township will by the 25th. If you're going to be later than that, clerks are very relaxed about that. They're not as anxious as they are about a lot of other things. So we're back to carryover. That's the beginning of everything. And you've got to know that as you have been in the position a little bit longer, coming up with carryover is going to be an easier process. I've talked to you about how you do it in detail. I've put a definition in here as well this time, but you're going to start with how much money in 2017, you're starting with this year. You're analyzing this year so you can think how much cash flow you're going to have to start next year. How much money on hand. So, you know, this is very much rubbing a crystal ball, and it's really kind of a painful process, and I'm sorry I did that to you, but that's how the process works. And know that the first few times will be the worst. Because you don't know how the budget year flows, because you haven't walked all the way through a year yet in most of your cases. I think the very best approach in the very beginning, I gave you the hard view and we talked about that last time, but if I were in your shoes and I were starting this year to guess next year, I'd go back and look how much money I had in the beginning of the year for the last 3 years and do an average of that number. And then, you know, I would just adjust my spending as the year goes on so I have that much money left at the end of the year. that means you're going to have to really look at the checkbook and know where you are. I would do a gut check kind of in September. Where am I in relationship to how much money I think I'm going to need at the end of the year? And adjust your expenses accordingly. You know, during this year, you really should be looking quarterly. How are we doing? How are we doing to have that much money left at the end of the year? It's going to be a lot more hand-holding because you haven't had the chance and the benefit of the cycle. Hope that makes you feel better. I used to just almost cry. Jim would say, get this done. I was like, yeah, right. I don't like to be wrong. And I don't like to be really, really, really wrong. And I hate to not know what I'm doing. But we're going to go back and look at this picture again. So this is what she thought she was going to get in this picture here. This is how she broke it out for the types of taxes. And what she has to do is make this a snapshot and go back and compare to this all year long. So if you're thinking that you had, the only thing you know for sure is how much money you had in the bank at the beginning of the year, which was $23,851 in this example. Think it says 2016, think of this as 2017. So she knew she had that much money, and she knew that this is what she was asking for as far as taxes. Now, you have to make sure that those were what got public, what the city agreed to do, or you've got something that you have to change right off the jump. But then you're starting to look at, so if the blue and the yellow here don't happen on this, you know, if your city gave you any blowback, you've got to come back and play with this. Then you have to kind of watch these other sources of income all year long and make sure you got that money. It's just a royal pain. I know it is, because you want to, or you're looking at programming, you're also looking at, you know, content to purchase. I understand, but this is just kind of the job y'all signed up for as director. So this is part of your playpen here. You have to know how this works. So as you're looking at these things, know what you're going to cut back on if you have a drastic revision of income. If you get a grant you weren't anticipating, you can still spend it, and know that you're going to have to increase your expenses for that one thing, offsetting. If you got $5,000, don't spend 10. Spend the $5,000. Then you have an impacted your budget. This is another one. I gave you several examples. Now this one I made it bigger so it's a little cleaner to see. The balance at the beginning of the year, you can say as of December 31st of the previous year or January 1st, because believe me, it's the same dollar amount. I don't care how you want to think of that. But that's the money you have. And when I say fund balance, that's the amount of money you have in a checking account or a savings account or any combination thereof, multiples, that's available to be spent as of January 1st. So if you have a CD, if it's general fund money that you need to eat with or buy books with, you'd have it in this total as well. Now, here's expenses. It's a different way of looking at it. And if you go back, you take this amount of money, the 88,587, and you subtract the anticipated expenses, and that's how much carryover she's looking at for having or he at the beginning of 2018. Now, what's the right number? Remember I said before that it's 2 months of expenses, and the reason you want it to be 2 months of expenses is you have a hard time getting money from your entity until February and sometimes early March. So you've got to have some money that's not tax dollars to spend. So now we're going to put those pieces of the budget into a budget format. This is what your city or township is going to do. If you're a district and you're fortunate and have, sometimes the county clerk will help you. A lot of times you're going to have to get your system consultants to help you because you're on your own. So first thing, you need to know what they want from you. If you're going to confuse them, if they only want to know that what you're going to do with spending the tax dollars, if they only want to talk about your tax dollars, and 99.8% of you, how's that for a stat? Very often, to be clinically accurate, very often they only want to know the tax dollars. So you're talking dollars to them, not mills at this point. And so you need to know what you're going to spend those tax dollars on. And that, remember I said salary, personnel is number one to start, and that's personnel and benefits. So know how detailed they want it, know the format they want. This is your first time through, so now you're getting more idea of what you can and can't do to make that better next year. And know who they is. Are you going to sit down with just the city manager or the city clerk? Are you going to go to a township board meeting and have a committee meeting in essence? Do you have to go to the county courthouse and meet with the accountant that's working with the townships? Know who they are that you need to make contact with. Now that you've done it once, you know how the process works in your cases, and it'll give you ideas going forward. I've given you 3 different links here to the municipal budgeting website. This has some basic information. This has got 4 years of budgeting information for your entity. And this one here is where the forms are for the city. You could just download, or township or district, special entity is what a district is technically called. You could download this form and look at it. I think it's always a good idea to know what those people are up against so that you present the things you need in a way that works for them. So here's that front page on that first link for our third link. This is the very beginning of the section about the budget work books for 2018. And I've bolded here the things that apply to cities and counties. We're going to do them first. The CPI rate used for cities and counties is 1.4%, which is an average of this urban CPI for 5 years. That was the tax legislation. I can't talk. Now, because they weren't sure at municipal accounts and reports about just exactly what the legislature was going to do to them this year, they did not put the computation page that's in the budget spreadsheet. They deactivated it for cities and counties and created a template that the city or the county has to use. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, just so you understand what I'm talking about. Here's the start of the template. So what the city has done in green here is put the total of the city, the library, their Parks and Rec district, if they have a separate, they have a commission, Parks and Rec Commission. So that first green number is the total levy. And we'll look at where that showed up. Then the next thing you do is you take off the 2017 library levy. Now, there are some exceptions. If you have a plain vanilla, what I would call a plain vanilla charter ordinance that says we're going to cap your dollars that you can levy at so many mills, you still come off here. If you have an unusual charter ordinance, and I can only think of at least one and possibly two that have a special ordinance that says, we don't care what you say, we get the final word. Those cities are now stuck with the fact that by tampering with library law, they can no longer take that library out of the dollar amount that's subject to cap. So in essence, they've hurt themselves. But that was just simply an intended consequence. And most of you, I can't think of any of you that this does not apply to. If you have a charter ordinance that sets a ceiling for mills, you can't go over so many mills, yours, and if you don't have any charter ordinance at all, your dollar amount comes out here. So they take your dollar amount out of their cap to start. Then there's a whole really long middle section I didn't even begin to show you because it crossed my eyes trying to play with this so I could create this. But what it says up here at the top, it says they could now spend an additional $32,979 and not have to go to election. Whoops, back. If you notice, then after they figure out how much more they could spend, then they have to come back and take the dollar amount that you asked for in property tax. Now, this is just property tax. That ad valorem dollar amount of property tax of $63,000, that's what this library is going to ask for this upcoming year. They put that back in, they put their rec commission new budget dollar amount in, and then this is the total dollar amount that they now can have without going to election. Okay, that $381,648. All right, so here's the hearing. This is the page out of the budget that went in the newspaper. Okay, and you will notice that this third line down says library. It has the prior year of authorized tax expenditures and tax rate. It has 2016, 2017, the current year we're in, and then on the last three columns are what they're anticipating for next year. So what this says is that the library cannot spend more than $74,003 of taxes, and that's all tax dollars. The vehicle taxes plus the property tax. The next column says of this $74,000, $62,000, $858 is property tax. And the final column it figured it itself, is that's approximately 10.515 mils. Okay? Yes, I hear you, Robin.
Okay. Carolyn keeps getting kicked out, it sounds like, and so she wanted to confirm, is this information comes from the city itself? Is this in the municipal website? Okay.
Okay, so if you look up McLouth, you can certainly find what they've done over the last, definitely. Okay. And I would look if I were her, because we do have it, and it's important just because it shows up on this piece of paper doesn't mean that the city sometimes gets in a bind and they spend your money not, as well as theirs. I can think of 3 different municipalities I know of that's happened to. So our libraries. that they just didn't get all their money because the city actually really desperately needed a fire truck, and so they spent some of yours and theirs. Their auditor said bad, naughty, and then made them give you money after the fact, but they still shorted you at the time. So it's really important you know what these numbers are. That's not an abstract. The reason I want you to look here is it says here is the actual assessed valuation of 2016. Here's the actual assessed value of 2017. You notice it went up. And now if you look at 2018's estimate, it went down. How much do you think 1 mil raises for this community? So you take $5,977,909 times 0.001. You want to chat and tell me what that 1 mil would be? I'm not looking, so do we have anybody that's chatted yet? Okay, chickens. So if I take this number.
We do have Kyle Cedarstrom says $5,977.91.
Well, actually, they'll round it up to the whole number, so it's $5,978. But yay, Kyle! Since this is City of Overbrook, and this is a fake, by the way, Kyle. This is not. He didn't know I was going to do this, but we had been talking, and I went out on theirs and just used 16 and 17's numbers for the pretend 17 and 18. So this is fake all the way around, but that means that 1 mil raises $5,978.
It looks like the same thing in Paola. Emily came up with the exact same number. So
very good, very good. Yay. That's where that comes from. And if you don't know what the estimated valuation of your community is, call the county clerk. The city right now may be harassed, so, sometimes it's harder to get from your city than you think, but the county clerk will tell you. Just fax it to you. Now, this is the actual page within a city or township budget that it's a tab that actually says debt service / library. And you will notice that there are numbers here. These came from the county treasurer. These numbers here that are the top green one and the motor vehicle numbers. Now, I will tell you on these forms, anything in green, the city clerk, the city, whoever does this budget on Excel, has to manually input. So, first thing to know on this, when you're looking at it, you want a delinquent tax number. Look up what you've been getting over the last 3 to 5 years. You want a number in that column that's an average of that number. Don't let it be blank. I've seen them that are blank. Motor vehicle comes directly from the estimates that the county treasurer gives the city. You'll notice that interest on idle funds, the city doesn't seem to, the library doesn't ever get any interest, even though the city keeps your money sometimes. You get 0 for interest. And you're solving for X. The total of X, this number here, 13,736, plus the 62,858 way down at the bottom. If you add those together, it equals 74,003 cents. And you've spent hours telling your story, getting it all crafted. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And you see what they said over here? They're typed in general government. So much for all your hard work. So don't stress about giving them every minute detail of your entire budget because it doesn't reflect all your hard work in this form. Give them what they want and move on. This is what actually is the final piece is called the certificate page. The county clerk signs off on it down at the bottom. All the library board, the city council members or the trustees of the township sign it at the bottom. Key pieces here for cities and counties is this line in yellow that says, is election required? And it automatically, based on however much you said you were going to spend, gives you a yes or no. That's a formula within Excel. You'll notice that this budget would not require election. If you go back and review that template page, it said they could spend up to $381,000 some odd dollars. You'll notice the total budget is $377,982. They do not have to go have an election in August. Everybody's really happy. Now, in November, the final valuation will get added here, and the county clerk will write in the adjusted mills based on this valuation down here. However, none of the dollar amounts will be affected. None of them. Not one. Now, if you'll notice here, this just had the library. In this community, they do not have an employee benefit fund for the library. That doesn't mean they don't pay Social Security and Medicare taxes for the library and unemployment and workers' comp and all that. It just means they don't have a separate levy. I went back in and showed, this is if you had a separate levy for those things, you would have dollar amounts here, just like you had for that general fund page. I wanted you to see this. The other thing I should have mentioned is this community, the city clerk has decided that they have a delinquency rate of 4.3%, which means that 93.7% of what they ask for is what they're going to put in the bank in the coming year. So to get closer to what they asked for, they add a delinquency rate on. I'm going to go back one slide, two slides. Now you're sick, I'm sorry. But here is on the library fund page. So the actual tax would be $60,267, but they added the delinquency rate to reflect the money they're not going to get. And they, in essence, is called over levied, if you think of it that way. They kind of raised their standard up. That just means you're going to end up taking 94% of that number, the 74. You just need to know that you're never going to get 100% of what you ask for when property tax is involved. The other thing is motor vehicle tax, you only get what people actually tag, the kind of cars people actually tag. And I know this gives you a real pain. These are benefits. You can pay every single one of these out of your general fund. However, if you have a separate formal employee benefits fund, you can pay them out of that and in essence gain $16,800 in your general fund because you don't have to pay it out of that anymore. Confusing, I know.
And this might be, okay, that answered Carolyn's question. Forget it.
Okay.
You had a question about where to put those.
Okay. So the employee benefit, if you have an actual levy, here's how it would look on that certificate and on that notice of hearing. You'd have a line that says library. You'd also have a line that says library employee benefit fund. The key to getting one of those, if you want one, is I would really look at if the city shows an employee benefit fund. If they're levying for themselves, they'll be more receptive to levying benefits in a separate fund for you. If they're not, it'll be a little tougher sell. Here is the information on district budgets. The things to know about districts is, baby, you're on your own. You know, when the air conditioning quits and you don't have the money, you just get to buy a lot of fans or borrow fans from a whole bunch of people. Because whatever you have money for, that's what you're going to do. Nobody else is going to come to your rescue. The advantage for a district library is that they levy directly. They don't have to convince the city to levy for them. They levy directly. Whatever they turn in to the county is what happens. And for an employee benefit fund, if you're a district library, I can't think of any reason why you would not have an employee benefit fund. You are the sole approval of that. You don't have to go to your city or township and get them to approve it on your behalf. Here's the difference. Here's the budget law for districts. It talks about the county clerk is, you give the certifying to the county clerk, and it goes directly on the tax roll of the county from there.
So Adam wants to clarify, townships follow the city rules, right?
Townships follow city rules, right. You have, you know, if you have a catastrophe in the library, you could maybe convince your township board to help you out. Maybe not. Maybe you have to put a sign on the door that says, bring a fan, the township won't fix the AC, whatever. Yeah. So this is districts, and this is the same. I will tell you, it's exactly the same information that everybody else goes through. I just wanted, I know there's a district library in this group. I wanted to make sure that they had access to this information so that they can then, you know, get in touch with me if they have questions. So this is the timeline. And by the way, do you see this gap waiver? That's something that you all do unless you're a second or first class city. And I have given Robin the template, and it's up on in Moodle now for you. One of the few things I did get done. So this is your timeline. And I will say this is very last thing. It's also the same for all of you. In November, you're not done with this once you give birth to it in June. You need to come back to this in November or December when you really know how much cash flow you're going to have, how your carryover is going to look. You can't change your tax dollars, but you can adjust this budget coming up to reflect more of what's actually going to happen. So you'll come back in November and December, and I've been tempted, I haven't decided yet, honestly. I want to know what changed for you. I'd love to hear from you if you would even just tell me what you changed in your budget. So this is for townships and districts. This is your information. And the difference is that for a district or a township, the rate of increase is going to be 1.3% for 2018. It's a different rate than the cities and counties. And instead of 5 years of the urban CPI, in the average of 5 years, it's based on the prior completed year. So that means for 2018, the rate of inflation in 2016 averaged out to 1.3%, and that's the most growth you can have without publication. Not election, publication.
Okay, and I'm not sure when Carolyn asked this, but she said, we do that, why the gap waiver? Okay, I'm sorry, I have things going up on my screen.
I'm not even looking at it, and okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, gap
so
waiver.
Why do we do the gap waiver?
The gap waiver, Kansas is a cash basis state, but nationally, the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, decided that sort of modified cash basis or accrual was the way to go, meaning you depreciate assets, which is way more accounting than you really want to know. But what you do every year is you pass this waiver, and it says for 2017, for example, in March of this year, we passed a GAAP waiver for 2017. It says basically all our accounting documents are going to be on the cash basis. And Carol will give you the legal statute, chapter and verse, but cash basis means I don't count money till it's in the bank, and I do not count an expense until a check is written. And this is just, you pass the waiver, you stick it in your minutes file for the year. If the city auditor may or may not ask for it. And a lot of times they do. So that's a GAAP waiver. So now these are district library forms. I'm not going to belabor the differences. This is a library of the Northeast Kansas Library System that is a district. It has general fund and employee benefit fund. This library page is something absolutely everybody has. Remember, that's that red tab page. And that you want the city to look at that red tab page, and it should say qualify all over the place. And if it doesn't say qualify in the top, it has to say qualify on the bottom, or you don't get state aid, and a lot of you then don't get your system grants. So this is a big deal. So here is how a district fills out things. You will notice that they have a lot more information that they should be putting down here. Instead of lifting that piece out for their municipality, as a district, you are the municipality, so you need to have all your stuff showing up here. I think this district actually has some problems because it's not filling out this information over here on interest, because they earn interest, they get gifts and grants. There's some money they left out. Down here on the next thing, they don't even call it anything. I would have probably broken this out a little bit, but they're saying they're going to spend in tax dollars $619,735. I just wanted you to see how a district looks. The thing that districts and townships have in common is they are required to pass, the township will do it, libraries don't, and in the district, the library does it all. They have a resolution before the budget is approved, and they have to publish if they go over that 1.3%. So here's an example of a resolution, and this would be a resolution that your city or township does. If you're a district, you're doing it directly. And this is off of the Excel workbook, so there's a lot of values, the -1 and the 0. Those are numbers that come automatically filled in as you do the input sheets. They have a lot of really complex formulas in this Excel spreadsheet. Here is the publication. If you're a township or a district and you go over the 1.3%, you put this little notice of vote in the newspaper, and it says basically in adopting the 2018 budget, we went over 1.3%. This last sentence here about members, so many voted in favor and so many voted against, can be deleted. So it's a really tiny ad if you're a township. So if you're a township library and they're really having a fit because they're going to go over the 1.3% because of the awful, awful library, you can say, get over it. All it has to say in the notice is, we did it. Tiny ad in the paper. More on the timeline. So it's your budget in their budget. Always think of it that way, unless you're a district. In that case, it's your budget in your budget. So think of what they want and when they want it, And then now we're going to get into the stuff that's homework. So annual reports are something that everybody should do. And I don't want it to be what I've seen in a lot of librarians' reports is we had this many circulations and this many door visits and we bought this many books. I want you to figure out how to give me an annual report for your library that has some graphics in it. Because different people get their takeaway in different ways. Some of them want to read it, others need to see it. So I've got some different ways to do that. Key off of whatever your mission or vision for your library is. Make this sing a little. OCLC has got some really good graphics for you that bring home the point. $14 billion in spending for libraries is about as much as people spend on retail video, tennis shoes, for Pete's sake, athletic footwear, and actually magazine advertising exceeds the cost of libraries. So look at different things here. Find some graphics. Go out and look at the infographics. There are so many infographic sites. Make your annual report sing. The other thing is annual reports should also have something you can, if you're really, really good at this, you can look at social return on investment. Government entities and nonprofits share this kind of return on investment kind of stuff. So if you go out and look at the nonprofit, it talks about nonprofit impact. You can also say government impact. I gave you a couple sources to look at there. The library use calculator is something that's fun to put up on your website, and it also can be fun to look at from taking those statistics. Here, I'll show you. So for books borrowed, you can put the CIRC figures in. You can use this as an annual reporting kind of creation document, put all your CIRC things in here, and you're assigning a dollar value to these things on the back side. If you go back here, it talks to you about how the calculator works and how to customize it on your website. And even if you don't want to put it on your website, you could create one that you put your annual numbers in, and it'll give you dollar values. Just a thought. So here's what I mean by a list of things that's really put you to sleep. And I think we do this way too often. So I've got this many card holders, and I circulated this many books. Notice I gave you the fact that the cost of the book's $25 average. School Library Journal publishes the annual cost of materials. Here's my population. Here's the total tax support. And you can make this property tax. I would probably just keep it at property tax and not confuse them, because when people think of taxes they pay, they really are thinking of the taxes they pay on their home, property tax. How many hours you're open, and the number of public access computers you have, and how many times they were used. Okay, those are facts. And you can list it just like this. Then you can kind of run it through the mill and think about this, and you're going to tell a story here. So I'm going to say Reality Public Library saved taxpayers $1,316,600. That came from taking the number of circulations on materials times the $25. This is a much more powerful. You're an economic engine in the community, because those people had over $1 million they could spend on essential needs for the family. took the tax dollars divided by the population, and it's $19.49 a person. Can't get a good trip to the movies for that anymore. And I had the calculator, and I had the services, and I got this much in services per person. So taking those numbers and then extrapolating from those numbers gives you a much more interesting story. And if you put this in some infographic format, it would be really powerful. We have this tendency to make excuses for ourselves, and I want you to really feel empowered to know how hard you work for the money. And I think you have to look at it, and they've done industry analysis that says that the public libraries outpace all the other sectors of the government for the efficient use of tax dollars. You get more bang for your buck from the tax dollars you give the library than you do for almost any other sector of government. So you do not have to take a back seat and say, yes, I know policemen and firemen are important, and people in a very specific time of need them. But we use the money you give us extremely efficiently, and we're also important to the economic and social well-being of a community.
We do have a question. Can you say once again how you found that $1,318? That was a couple of slides back, or 13 million, sorry.
Okay, so let's go back here. Gotta back up a minute. So I had total circulations of 52,744 of books. Does that help? And you can go back through the time value of money. I'll send out some more information on how I got these numbers. I'll put that up. I'm writing it down right now so I don't forget. Data mine. If you go out, and there's a lot of information on the web on really taking statistics and using them to tell powerful stories. If you just go out and do statistics and stories, you're going to get a lot of information. I love Alice Sizer Warren's comments here. I want you to be so knowledgeable, you definitely own your numbers. Because not only do you understand how they work at home in the library, but you know how it impacts the city budget, and you know what you do for, you know why it matters for your community. You know what an economic impact you make on your community. You know the importance of the information to your community. I don't want you to take a backseat to anybody. What you do is important. It isn't a nicety. It makes the community worth living in. So homework number 1 that I set up was to give me your 2017 budget with a carryover, and then work on that 2018 budget. And if you've already had to go in and tell your story, this is already done, and I should have the homework. Now, I want you to go back and create an annual report for 2016, because you have all the numbers for 2016. There's no guessing about it. How many programs you had, how many people attended, adults and children. You've got a lot of information and stats to draw on. So play with an annual report format. This is something that you're going to need going forward. Then think about how you would tell that story of your tax dollars to your city or township in particular. You have a district you have to sell to as well at the budget hearing. So take a minute and really work through what's important. Collect stories all year long. You have grandparents that come in and Skype with grandchildren because of bandwidth. You have people that are riding their bike across the state and they stop in to check their email and their social media. There are a lot of different stories about the importance of the library, how you fit into the strategic planning that your city has. There's just a lot of things to think about. These are not just dry and sterile numbers that only affect you in just little short instances. You have to make those numbers breathe, and they have to reflect what you're planned in your strategic plan. The budget is a reflection of your strategic plan, what you need to get done, where you want to go. It's all integrated and related. And this first couple years that you're in a director's position, you're just pulling in all these different strands. And I want you to get really, really comfortable with this, because the better you do this, the better your library will do in the long run. So does anybody have any other questions? I will tell you the second part of your homework. You know, if you could get that to me by November, I haven't even told Robin this, but if you could make part 2 due by November, that'd be great. If you want to do it sooner and just get it off your mind, that's great too. It's not meant to be a punishment. It's not meant to be time consuming. It's meant to be useful. So if you need more information, get in touch with me. I can give you resources and places to go and things to look at. Any other questions? There's my contact information. And I will be getting in touch with you as I look at your information that you've sent so far. I really appreciate all your work, just so you know.
Okay, well, we'll get the all that good stuff uploaded to the Apple site so that you guys can see this. And Nicole says the annual report is due when, but the presentation handout for the city.
Well, I'm assuming most of you have already done it. If you haven't had to talk to your city about how much money you need yet, it's a good time to think about that. So the key there, as a city, I know that a charter ordinance is in place in Tonganoxie. The key there is you've had to know how old those things are, because after 20 to 25 years, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. You're just kind of flat up there on the ceiling. You're a flat Stanley for sure. But you're not going to get that changed this year at this point. So maybe you start thinking in the long range about why I need to have a higher ceiling, because I need to be able to do these things for my community. And I think, one of which I know in Tonganoxie's case is a new library and the demands and financing that's going to require. So go to it.
So I would think the annual report and the presentation would.
You can get them to me anytime between now and November that it works for you. I just wasn't going to stick it up right here and say it has to be done in 2 weeks, because Robin is the next taskmaster and she's really mean. So sorry.
Me? Oh,
no.
See, I was just going to say the next session is June 7th, and it's me blathering on about technology for an hour. So yeah, I'll try not to be mean.
Well, see, she'll have all those. She can give you some infographic sites and all sorts of things. How about that?
I've already put a few in the chat, so.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And do you know if we can send in rough drafts to have Laura look over before we send in the final rendition of our budget?
Sure.
Okay.
You might email that directly to me so I don't see that as part of homework. Okay?
All right. Well, I'm going to, as soon as I get the session closed, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.